Hello, everybody. Today we're going to go to the bookstore together. We're starting off a new thing because I like to wander in and out of bookstores, and my preference is that I leave with a handful of stuff and max out my card. So we're going to start off. We're going to go to a bookstore in London. It is Waterstones. You probably already know it. If you're living in the UK, you definitely do. If you're from North America, Canada, it's kind of like Barnes and Noble. It's our version of Barnes and Noble or Indigo. So we're going to walk in. I'm going to talk you through. We're going to look at some books and try and guess what I end up walking out with. And then after we've walked in, I'll open up the books and we'll have a little chat about them. So whenever I'm in London, I'll typically go to this bookstore just because there's so much variety, multiple floors. London does have some other good bookstores like Daunt in Marylebone, and I'll take you there at some point. But I like this one. This is typically where you'll find me if I want a day at the bookstore. And they have some of their best books out front, some of these really old style books, and you can see like the original pricing, like 2 shillings and stuff like that. Jacobean Tragedies is a good shout. I did some of that at Oxford. That was my area of interest. Of course, I was leaning towards picking up some Shakespeare, but I've got enough Shakespeare. Yeah, when you go through the front door, you can go to the right a little bit, and then you'll have all these orange original Penguin paperbacks, which I think are really collectible and really nice. You've got some award winners here. I've tried reading those, but not for me. Pushkin Press. This is Pushkin Press. This is, I think, maybe a new publishing print. Oh, the covers are just gorgeous, though, aren't they? There's Tolstoy with a translation that I've not read before. Chekhov looking very dashing, but the covers, look at that, the beauties by Chekhov. I think whoever designed that did a really good job. Granta is a good literary magazine up there with the Paris Review. I used to like Tin House, I think it was called, but that's out of print now. Okay, this is where the big boys spend their time. It's the Loeb Classical Library area. You got Greek on the left in green, and in red that's the Latin. This is like, I think, old English style. I haven't spent much time here, haven't forayed into it, but this whole classic section is a place that I like to spend a little bit of time. I used to be able to understand Latin quite well, but it's been many, many years now. So it's on my sort of bucket list, literary book bucket list, I suppose you'd call it, to refresh my Latin and maybe pick up some Greek. I'm kind of interested in doing a doctorate in classics at some point. I find the ancient stuff endlessly fascinating. This big book here looks like a fun read. And then you've got the music section downstairs in this Waterstones next to the journals. So I typically go there quite early on. I'll look at the vinyls. Do I want any classical music? And then I'll have some fun with the journals. I've recently started designing my own journals, but I like the Leuchtturms 1917. They're better than the Moleskines, and these neon ones are pretty cool. For vinyl, the genre of choice is typically jazz. And then I go straight to the Everymans. Now, I make it a point, whenever I go to a bookstore, I have to leave with an Everyman. You probably know that if you watch some of my videos already. I'm always looking at Everymans. I'm always pulling the covers off and collecting them. This Waterstones in particular has a pretty good Everyman collection. What I'll say is I've struggled to find any that I haven't already kind of got or read. Got Thomas Hardy here. I've got all of Thomas Hardy. He's a great read. If you haven't met Hardy yet and read any of his rural pastoral narratives, then you should give him a good crack. You got Les Mis there. I've got that version, but the translation of that one isn't the best. It was, I think, actually the Everyman translation of Les Mis was the first English translation. Came out at the same time as the original in French. These covers are lovely. There's a good mix here. You've got Muriel Spark, Sylvia Plath, Orwell. There we go. I was drawn to Voltaire, Candide. Not sure if I was going to pick that up, but The Tale of Genji. You can see that sort of caught my eye there, thinking about it. On the Western Front, I've got that. You've got Philip Pullman there. Here's something potentially controversial. I'm not sure about Pullman, personally. You've got Jane Austen, wonderful stuff. She's you could easily read all of Austen like very, very quickly, half a year. You've got Dickens down here. I personally like the Dickens collection with the original printing, Fabry, I believe, but got Barnaby Rouge, or it's called Barnaby Rubbish by some mean people. Baldwin, I'm in simpatico with Baldwin. I read some of his stuff like Giovanni's Room and some of his non-fiction, and I feel an affinity. This is a nice section here with like original covers. I think the artwork on these covers is really nice. I've actually got the Terry Pratchett myself signed by him. I met him. These are really nice horror-themed covers. Covers are important. I do lambast some booktubers for focusing solely on the cover, but the covers are important. Let's not kid ourselves. And some of these prints, it's Penguin, right? Clothbound. I've got the Anna Karenina, myself, lovely. That's by Rosamund Bartlett, the translation. I was drawn to these as well. You can see you've got Jane Eyre and you've got some Jane Austen, and it's kind of like cut out in the design. You've also got some Chinese literature, which is actually my literary blind spot. I'd have to get into that a bit more at some point, along with Indian literature. This is Persuasion. I thought the cover design was really nice on this, but the paper quality, perhaps not. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, one of my favourite horror novels of all time. And then this stuck out, Cervantes. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm reading Don Quixote, or rereading it at the moment, and it's a great book. First World War poetry, that stuff will make you cry. We've got a podcast coming out where we're going to be interviewing a man who lived through the Blitz, so that'll be really interesting. Tolstoy, of course. I always try to add something to my Tolstoy collection. You've got Anna Karenina, of course. These Norton critical editions are pretty good. If you're into Tolstoy, I would recommend you check those out. Tale of the Genji. Alright, so I really felt compelled to get Genji, or Tale of the Genji, or Genji Monogatari. But there's 3 translations. One's in an Everyman. And so I was trying to compare them, hold them up against each other. And I don't know, because they're so different. It was a hard decision. They have a Shakespeare section at this Waterstones, which I'm always drawn to. These are the Ardens. They're really good. If you want to get single volumes of Shakespeare's plays and you want like introductions and notes and annotations, they're somewhat flawed, but they are probably the best option on the market. We can talk about that at some other point, why I think they're flawed. They can be a bit biased and stuff, but they're lovely. They're very collectible. And then you've got the poetry section here, which... Persuasion, with a beautiful cover. I like to sit down in the poetry section and spend some time, but there was 2 people taking up the only seats, which is a shame. But the poetry section is a good fun. I usually find something new, like single volumes of poetry. I think too many people just read anthologies, and it's like a greatest hits album. It's all right, but sometimes you want the actual album. Haiku's pretty cool. You got. What I liked about this is you've got the original on the right, and then they've even spelt it out with the furigana. Haiku, there's an art to appreciate in haiku because it's so different from Western poetry. We pop upstairs and we're in the nature section, and these covers. I'm just talking about the covers today. These are beautiful. They're about different birds and wildlife and finches. Ooh. Let's grab some finches. They're very, very, very expensive, those. They're like 70 quid for 1 volume, which is nuts. So then I popped up to the foreign language section. This is the French section. No shade on the French. I've got French books, but the covers, there I go, talking about the covers again, they're not as inspired as other languages, I think. They're a bit plain. Then I went back to the Everyman, looked at the Langland, found this neat collection of Seamus Heaney, and then I was torn. I didn't know what to pick up. I saw this deluxe version of J.R.R. Tolkien, and I was starting to worry that I was going to walk out empty-handed. Okay, so I picked up 3 really nice books from my latest bookstore visit, and I'd like to show you them and talk about them a little bit. Now, I'm a bit of an amateur at this sort of vlog style. I'm way more into the lectures and stuff, so if you like this sort of thing, let me know and I'll make more. If not, no worries, just do more lectures. Okay, the first book that I picked up, and I'm really excited, it's J.R.R. Tolkien's Beowulf. It's the deluxe edition. You can see how beautiful that is. Should we pull it out? There we go. You can see it. By the way, I don't know if you can tell from the camera, but the actual book quality is really nice. It's actually hard to stop touching it. It's the same with the paper quality. Very, very sturdy paper. I'd be quite interested, just as a geeky little thing, knowing what paper quality this is. No wonder this was a pricey one. This gold embossed dragon, you can see that here. Tolkien actually drew that himself. There's a few illustrations and they've embossed it. I'll show you on the first page. There we go. We can kind of see that's Tolkien's handiwork there. And there should be a couple more. But anyway, essentially this book, it's got a commentary, it's got the actual text, the translation, it's got a bunch of notes, and it's got also the Select spell. This was compiled after Tolkien's death by his son, Christopher Tolkien. Funnily enough, I actually was in the lecture hall, the medieval lecture room, for classes on medieval lectures like Beowulf, the very one that Tolkien himself taught, the very one that he would have been in that room, and he would have walked past the Bodleian, he would have walked through Oxford, perhaps with C.S. Lewis. So I was in there when I was studying Oxford, which is really cool. Old English it's something I really want to get back into. I struggled with it in my first year of university, but now I'm endlessly fascinated with it. As a language, as a study. A lot of people talk about epics like Homer, they talk about Virgil, Dante, Milton of course, but few actually. I mean, Seamus Heaney helped with his translation, which is more poetic, from what I understand, less of an accurate rendering. Few forget that we've already been there. The Brits, or wherever we came from, I suppose, the Anglo-Saxons, that sort of tradition, Danes, you know, if you go back far enough, we have our own epic tradition, and Beowulf is a solid story, and more people should read it. I will probably do a series of podcasts, not only on Beowulf, but Paradise Lost very soon. So if you're interested, check out the link to the Hardcore Literature podcast below and subscribe. That would be appreciated. But it's just really, really interesting. And the one thing that's most interesting is the fact that you can pick up on his son's hesitation for publishing. And that's carried over from his father, who obviously was hesitant about publishing, because he says he wanted to create a translation for the general reader who knows nothing about this sort of thing. But he also knows that the academics will have their pistols unsheathed and loose and ready to go. I can relate with that. And they'll be ready to butcher him and crucify him and say, oh, why did you make this linguistic decision? That's wrong, that's wrong. And Tolkien's like, well, I actually have years of experience and research. I have pages and pages, and I can go into my decision for why I changed this kenning. By the way, as an artistic thing, the kenning is a really nice thing that I'd like to talk more about in the future. But and so he says people will crucify him without knowing that he's done the reading, and actually that their reading is more surface. But he also doesn't want to include all of that as sensibly just academic waffle, because it will put off the lay reader. So he basically abandoned it. He abandoned what's probably the most faithful translation. Is it the most poetic? No, but it is probably the most faithful, and it's a riveting story, because he thought people wouldn't appreciate it. Well, I'll tell you what, it might be a bit belated, but I appreciate it, and I would highly recommend you check it out. I'll drop a link in the description below if you like the look of that. That's Beowulf, the deluxe edition. Right, we've got 2 more books. The next one, and I had some struggle with this one, it's The Tale of Genji, okay? Now, the struggle was I picked up the Everyman translation initially, big. I can't remember his name exactly, Sedenbecker. His translation apparently is like the nicest, I think, but perhaps not the most faithful, but it's also one of the early ones. There's a couple of other translations, but the one that most people gravitate to is this one, Tyler. Now, I put them up against each other, and I found it really hard because Tyler's style was overly poetic and was hard to follow, but in that sense it's kind of more faithful to the Japanese, because the Japanese constructions are more passive, they go all around the houses, there's a lot of ellipsis and sort of the unsaid, so it's not very direct. Tale of the Genji. Anyway, I went for this one just because firstly the accompanying notes look really, really good, and it's just filled with pictures. You can see there's a picture there. And I like the chapter beginnings where they tell you a little something, little linguistic things. Picture there, picture there. So I have a reading schedule and technique outlined for The Tale of the Genji, similar to another book. You might know it, Eiji Yoshikawa's Musashi. This is the sort of book, Genji, that I think you probably want it to accompany you or be a companion across many years. Some people do binge it and inhale it, but I think with these big books, it's good to slow down. So personally, I'm going to be reading 1 chapter every month. And that'll take years to get through. And if you finish your chapter for the month, cool. You can either reread the chapter, or you can read a different translation, or you can search things out like poems, historical facts, and learn more about it. But you can't go on to the next chapter. And then when you come to the next chapter, Now you can go back over 2 chapters, but you can't go on to the next one until the month has elapsed. It's a style of reading that is, it's somewhat similar to the Proust Project, but that's a little bit of a different one. Tale of the Genji, a lot of people call it the first novel. I think it was written in like 1000 or 1100 or something like that, written by a woman. Some of these early texts were written by women. A lot of people don't know that the book of Genesis was written by a woman of the Solomonic court. So that'll be interesting from that. I've dipped into it already. I find it endlessly interesting. I love the culture. I remember speaking to my Japanese friends when I was in Japan, and I asked them about Genji Monogatari, and they said, no, it's just boring, don't bother with it. I think maybe they just weren't literature fans, because I think it's quite interesting, and I'm quite good at putting up with these long books where ostensibly nothing happens. But anyway, yeah, Tale of Genji should be a fun one. And last, I have this thing where when I go into a bookstore, if they have an Everyman collection, I always have to leave with a new Everyman. It's my little treat. And so I opted for The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Now with the Everymans, what I like to do is denude them, or nude them, whatever the made up word is. Take their covers off basically, yeah, strip them bare, because the hardback is lovely, and they come in different colours depending on the sort of literary epoch or where they are in the world or the genre, stuff like that. And that's a light green one for my collection. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, which will be endlessly valuable as I hurtle into battle atop my horse next week, which is definitely on the schedule. Anywho, those are the 3 books that I picked up on my latest bookstore visit. Let me know what you're reading, and if you thought this was cool, please hit the like button and subscribe. Happy reading.